The transfer portal is hot and heavy across all sports at the University of Arkansas as we head into the 1st of May. This is the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. I'm Chip Souza, joined by Christina Long, and we're going to talk to you about all things Arkansas sports today. We've got a couple of segments lined up. We've got Christina lined up first, and we're going to talk some Arkansas football. And we want to mention a little bit about this podcast. We're going to be here 3 times a week with a ton of Arkansas sports news as well as sports from across the region and the state. We'll hit on the latest news as well as maybe some pop culture reference in there. And some we're going to have a lot of fun with it. We're going to have some weekly guests. And so we're going to get this first segment rolling with Christina Long, the managing editor of Hogs Illustrated magazine. And we're going to talk some football. Now, the last time I saw Sam Pittman was after the Red-White game. And he said, quote, "I hope nobody leaves. Why would they want to leave?" And then it seemed like 10 minutes later, the portal heated up.
Right. And I think when Sam talked about that, he talked a little bit about how, you know, in this day and age, obviously, no team is not going to lose anyone in either transfer portal window. I don't know if that's happened in the last several years.
Yeah.
So he knew, you know, we are going to lose some players, but he was also saying, you know, if we lost nobody, if this was the team we brought into the fall, we would be happy. It was kind of the message there. But this is the transfer portal, and of course, people started to leave. So they have lost a few players. They have also gained a few players. He had a pretty set plan from the start of spring of what was kind of on his transfer portal shopping list. So he's gotten a few of those boxes checked, but then also as people leave, then you have a hole you have to plug. So then you have to recruit that position.
And I think he said that day that I think maybe he had 5 at that time, 5 or 6 available scholarships, and then there's been some transition. Obviously, I don't know what that number is now, but I'm guessing it's probably still close to that 4 or 5.
Right, yeah. They've been plugging those holes as people have left. You know, they got a new scholarship quarterback after Jacolby Criswell left. You know, they're filling those spots, but they're also trying to use the ones they already had available to get kind of what was on that wish list.
I find it interesting that 2 of the players that left Arkansas through the portal went back to schools that they were at before they transferred to Arkansas. I found that very interesting.
Right. Jacolby Criswell goes back to North Carolina, and then Snaxx Johnson goes back to Baylor. And that's rare. You see it happen occasionally, but not often. So to have it twice on the same team in the same year, I wonder if that's happened before. I can't imagine it has.
You're like, well, what did you leave for before, and did that change?
Right.
You know?
Right. I always just wonder how the conversation with the coach went.
Yeah.
Because both of them, they're going back to the same coaches that they left. There wasn't a coaching change. So I just wonder how those conversations go. And Snaxx Johnson in his commitment, he was like, "I love you, Coach Aranda." And I was like, I just wonder how those conversations go.
You know, we break up, we make up, you know, whatever. I mean, you know, there should be a song about that. So Jacolby Criswell, you mentioned, you know, he left and went back to North Carolina. Of course, he is an Arkansas native from Morrilton. But Christina, in that red and white game, you could kind of see in the pecking order as far as the quarterback room that he may have, you know, he was passed in that pecking order.
Right.
Yeah.
It was so interesting this spring because the whole thing about spring was we were expecting this quarterback battle between him and Taylon Green, and then it ended up first day being pretty clear that it was Taylon Green. And Criswell was mostly running with the 3s, occasionally with the 2s with Malachi Singleton. They kind of traded off.
Yeah.
And then KJ Jackson, the freshman, mixing in there. So then it became a QB2 battle, and it still kind of looked like Singleton was maybe going to be the favorite there. So it looks like that's kind of what happened there for Criswell.
Well, and of course, and then in that post-game red-white media gathering, the question was asked by someone, that battle for number 2, is that decided? And Pittman was real quick to say, no, it is not. This is going to be a continuing battle because KJ Jackson certainly moved faster than maybe I thought he would, but he seems to have grasped this offense very quickly. And in that game, he had a lot more pass attempts and anything than even Taylon did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's an impressive freshman.
Yeah.
They're excited about him for the future for sure. And so it'll be interesting to see going forward how those 3 guys, plus this new guy that they're bringing in from Coastal Carolina, who is only a sophomore, he'll only be a sophomore this year, just to kind of see how that mix shakes out, you know, going into future years.
Oh, competition's good. I mean, that should bring out the best in everybody, and competition is good. If you don't want competition, maybe you need to find something different to do besides competitive sports.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a little bit of I thought was a surprise today or this week was Dom Johnson going into the portal. I thought he was in that mix, but he's entered the portal. And if you again going back to the red-white game and in the scrimmages that they had, Braylon Russell, another freshman coming in from Benton, is pushing. But he's going to push for playing time.
Absolutely. Braylon Russell was so impressive all spring. I mean, he is he is a grown man at 18. You know, we saw, it's funny, a couple of coworkers and we were at walk-ons, and we saw him at walk-ons, and he does not look like a 17, 18-year-old kid. So, I mean, he is going to be a really, really good player for them. And then I was really impressed with Jaquindon Jackson, the Utah transfer. He really was a big add for them and really showed off this spring. And so I think the running back room is their deeper room, but between losing Isaiah Augustive,
correct,
and then also Dominique Johnson, that does kind of hurt that depth a little bit. Now, they added this transfer from Florida State, Rodney Hill. So we'll see where Rodney Hill fits in, what his kind of skill set is, because they have a couple of, I would say that Russell and Jaquindon Jackson are kind of their more bruising,
hammers.
Pull you over. Yes.
Yeah,
and then
hammers,
they have a couple of other more finesse guys, things like that. And so I'm curious to see how Rodney Hill kind of slots in that group.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. And, of course, some of these guys, we don't know where they're going to go yet. As Christina mentioned, Snaxx Johnson going back to Baylor, Jacolby Criswell going back to North Carolina, and then we'll find out where Dom ends up and Isaiah ends up, and any other movers that might happen to be out there. So let's talk about some of the guys that are coming in. The offensive line got a nice boost. Joe Moore comes in from Syracuse. They need more depth in the offensive line. The first unit guys looked really good, I thought, in the spring. The depth is going to be an issue, and they're going to have more depth there for sure.
Absolutely. And I spoke with a friend who covers Syracuse, my friend Emily Liker. You can read a story I did after talking to her today on WholeHogSports.com. And she talked a little bit about how Syracuse brought him in from Richmond. They brought him in before last season as kind of a really experienced guy, and he was supposed to start for them last year at guard, and then he ended up having a high ankle sprain in the last few days of their fall camp. So he only appeared in 3 games with like 29 snaps. So he didn't get to play much last season. So he did have a little bit of a setback. But this is also like a 7th-year guy. I mean, this is a veteran. He doesn't have
He's
Power
a grandfather,
5.
by the way. I mean,
he is so old.
Yeah.
No. So, I mean, this is an experienced veteran guy, which is something that they really need. And I think it'll be interesting to see where he slots in, because he has trained at all 3 positions on the line.
Yeah.
He played mostly tackle at Richmond, and then they were going to make him a guard at Syracuse. And then this spring, when he was expected to play at Syracuse this fall, they started repping him at center.
Okay.
So it sounds like he could really go wherever they feel he is most
like
needed.
a Swiss Army knife. That's
Absolutely.
awesome. Also, Anthony Switzer, defensive back coming in. Snaxx goes out. Switzer comes in again to give them depth and push the other guys. He is an Arkansas native from Marion.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You see Utah State transfer, and you don't necessarily expect an Arkansas native.
Like,
but
how'd you get out of here and go that far?
Exactly. So having him come in when they've lost, Snaxx Johnson, I think it'll be important to get a little bit more depth there in the secondary. So, I mean, they've got a lot of returners in the secondary.
They do. And the younger guys I saw too, they're pushing the older guys too. And that's what you need.
Absolutely.
Push them as much as you can. Linebacker depth has been an issue. They got a linebacker in Larry Worth coming in from Jacksonville State.
Absolutely. And then they also added a guy from Marshall just yesterday. They added Steven Dix, who was Marshall's 3rd leading tackler last season, I believe. So they've got a couple guys there. And linebacker, I think, is their most pressing need, especially, I mean, definitely on defense, but I would say just generally. I mean, when you lose all of your top snap getters at linebacker to either the portal and then one that was out of eligibility.
Correct.
And all the guys behind them are sophomores, you know?
Kind of scary.
Exactly. So it's definitely their most pressing need, and they need that, and they know that. And so some of the guys that are those sophomores, they had good springs. Brad Spence was really impressive.
Yeah,
he kind of took big strides. And then they got Xavier Sori from Georgia before, who was able to go through spring practice. So Xavier Sori is kind of a guy that they really needed to shore that up. But Pittman said from the beginning, part of their portal shopping list was linebackers. And so now they've got these 2 guys that have a little bit of experience, that bring a little bit of veteran leadership there, I would say. And I think that's something that they really, really will benefit from.
Well, it's interesting. I'm not sure when is the portal closed. Was it?
I believe it closes midnight tonight, Wednesday, as we're speaking.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what I thought.
So.
That's what I thought. And there may be some more movers and shakers out there. Some guys who might have been on the fence. I'm talking about from other programs who might have been on the fence about whether they were going to stay, and maybe too far down the depth chart to make any kind of headway, and they're looking for better opportunities. So there still may be some more coming through. And if Pittman does have those 3 or 4 scholarships left, I'm sure they'd be open to taking a look at whoever might be coming in late.
Absolutely. I mean, the portal stuff does not wrap up when the portal closes.
No.
I mean, there will be guys committing for the next several weeks.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, what else they're able to get. But it's definitely, it never stops. There could be, somebody that commits between our recording and when this hits people's ears. So you never know.
Yeah. Keep hitting that refresh button
Exactly.
over and over and over again. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. So that'll wrap up this first segment of the podcast with football with Christina. Again, as she mentioned, if you want to read more about what we're covering on the football scene, basketball, all of that, WholeHogSports.com is your place to go for the latest news. We have transfer portal trackers going on there for football and basketball, men and women both. So you'll want to stay on top of that. Again, that's WholeHogSports.com. Christina, thanks for being on with me, and we'll have you back next week.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll be right back.
Stay on top of all Arkansas Razorback sports with a Digital Plus subscription on the Hogs Illustrated app. Get complete Razorbacks coverage in one location. Your subscription gives you 20-plus issues of Hogs Illustrated magazine, the most unique and compelling coverage anywhere in the state, plus total access to all the content on WholeHogSports.com, including breaking news, commentaries, analysis, features, recruiting, award-winning photos, and premium message boards. Subscriptions start at just $17 per month. Join the Hog Sports Network team at subscribe.waco.com. That's subscribe.wehco.com. Or call 479-684-5509 to get your front row seat to Arkansas Razorback sports. Go Hogs!
And you're back with the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. I'm Chip Souza, now joined by my basketball guru, Anthony Christensen. He knows all things about the round ball, and I'll tell you what, Anthony, you won't know the players without a program for this Arkansas basketball team for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's they're getting a lot of high profile guys coming in, obviously. John L. Davis coming in, committing, last night.
Yeah.
Announcing it on his, personal social media platforms this morning. But I mean, he's, one of the best guys who is available in the transfer portal. I mean, whenever I like to try to compare, certain guys with other guys whenever they commit to a certain place. But I mean, John L. Davis is the guy you compare other guys to.
Wow.
Just because, I mean, he's been the guy, at Florida Atlantic for a couple of years now. He was the guy on a Final Four team. And then was the guy on a team that was, preseason, top 10 in the country. Maybe, some people thought, maybe that's a little bit, high for a Florida Atlantic team. But, when you look at what they returned from, last season's Final Four run, you can easily see why that team is, rated, top 10 in the country preseason. Obviously didn't live up to that throughout the whole of the season, but the first time that Florida Atlantic's ever made back-to-back NCAA tournaments, and John L. Davis is the guy for both of those teams.
He was the dude. So Coach Calipari came in. He had one player on his roster when he had his introductory press conference a couple of weeks ago. Then they got it up to where they could play 3-on-3 after that competition. Now they could actually play a game.
They could actually play a game, yeah. And you're kind of starting to see exactly kind of what he's kind of looking for in a roster. Because I mean, you've got obviously Jonas Adu coming in from Tennessee, just kind of a big dominant, big man to put in the middle. On his day, one of the best, bigs in the SEC. Yeah. Then you have a super high ceiling guy in Zvonimir Ivicic following him from
Thank
Kentucky.
You for that, by the way. Thank you. I didn't have to pronounce that. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
But you have him following him from Kentucky, and I mean, was a little inconsistent in his minutes, didn't play a ton at Kentucky, but you could definitely see, he's kind of that quintessential modern big, who can step out, hit a three, he's good off the dribble, even though he's 7'2". So, I mean, the ceiling there with him is, astronomical. We already talked a lot about John L. Davis.
Yeah.
And then you have the three freshmen coming in, all of which are either 4 or 5 star rated on the 24/7 composite. And I mean, you look at a guy like Boogie Fland, who, a lot of people were like, when he was initially committed to Kentucky, people were concerned about, can this kid, step in and be that starting point guard? And now you have an experienced guard like John L. Davis to play alongside him. So maybe you do put Boogie Fland in that starting point guard position.
Yeah.
Since you have a guy who's experienced like Davis alongside him.
I wish my nickname was Boogie. I love that. But that would mean I was actually could boogie.
Yeah.
So.
You and I both.
And I can't. So I'm not going to get that cool nickname.
I cannot either.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got a guy like him playing alongside a guy like John L. Davis. So I mean, maybe you do trust Boogie Flan in that starting point guard role. Obviously, there's still a lot of things to fall into place and whatnot. So you don't really know who's going to do what and what role quite yet. But then you have a guy like Billy Richmond, who is one of the best perimeter defenders in the 2024 freshman class, and then you also have Carter Knox, whose potential is also through the roof. So I mean, you can really see exactly, or at least what you can maybe start to
see how the roster.
Yeah, you can try to put it together, and you can see what Calipari's vision is with it.
Yeah. So if my math is correct, I think there's 6 on the roster now. He's looking to add 6 more, 7 more, 5 more.
Yes, you get 13 scholarship spots. So I mean, it's 7 if you want to include Lawson Blake, who's a walk-on.
Gotcha.
So they're looking probably at 7 more if my math is correct. Yeah.
So we're constantly moving here and filling roster spots. But I like the way Coach Cal is doing this. He's doing it very slowly, very methodical, and looking to build a roster, not quickly, but a roster that the jigsaw puzzle pieces are going to hopefully fit better than the ones last year that didn't fit well. I know, Eric Musselman was a guy who had built a reputation on getting guys in the portal and making those fit, but last year just never, that odd corner piece just never could bring it all in the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see that, like we mentioned. Obviously, you have a young, inexperienced point guard and somebody like Boogie Flan. You pair him with a guy going into his last season of eligibility in John L. Davis.
Yeah.
You could maybe play somebody like Jonas Adu, in that starting 5 position, and maybe have Zvonimir Ivicic, play in the 4.
Yeah.
Just because of how versatile he is. And you can see there's a few different versatile spots, kind of filled by the guys that he's brought in. So you can see, how, you could put Billy Richmond in the 3 to have, guard against, the other team's best wing or somebody along those lines. So you can see, how these guys are kind of fitting together, maybe better than, maybe last year's team. Obviously, I wasn't here for the start of last year's team. But you can kind of start to see, like you mentioned, where all the pieces fit together. And it'll be interesting to see, exactly, how it all kind of comes together when, Calipari has his full roster put together.
Now let's talk about some of the guys that were here before. Trayvon Brazile, of course, announced today he was going to go, put his name in the NBA draft. Now he's not going to do that. He's decided to go into the transfer portal, which I guess tells me his draft prospects were not great, and he's going to try to go to another school and try to improve his draft status with another year of college. But what about some of the other guys, Battle and some of those other guys who have not announced or signed anywhere yet?
It's interesting because, I mean, when you look at, the guys that Cal is bringing in, you bring in a John L. Davis, how much room is there for a guy like Caleb Battle to maybe start in that starting 2 spot? When you kind of expect John L. Davis to be starting in that spot, is, a guy like Caleb Battle okay with being, a 6th man or something like that? Or maybe you try to put John L. Davis in the 3 role and have Caleb Battle in the 2 in a smaller lineup. So it's I think it's a lot of, a little bit of TBD at the moment, just on a lot of those guys, and whether or not, Calipari is to bring them back. Obviously, Trevin Brazile, I suppose, could, come back should Calipari invite him back, or, if he does end up fully exiting the draft waters. Excuse me. But there's a lot of interesting pieces in that. It's kind of hard to follow with all the guys who are in the portal. But I think the most intriguing one is absolutely Caleb Battle, just because, I mean, he wasn't shy about how much he really enjoyed being at Arkansas. And he's been on a couple of visits. I know he went to TCU for a visit. I believe he went to Kansas State as well on a visit. So it'll be interesting to see what he ends up deciding to do. Nobody really knows for sure if he's had any contact with Calipari or Kenny Payne or anybody like that on the new staff just yet. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But I think he's kind of the key one to kind of follow, because you could see that one kind of play out in a couple of different ways, especially with the addition of John L. Davis.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, thanks for being on with me today. And, of course, if you want to find out and stay on top of the latest basketball news and the players that are coming and going, well, mainly coming because the going has already happened. But the ones coming in, this is your guy right here at WholeHogSports.com. You'll want to check that. Make sure that refresh button on your laptop or device is working because you're going to have to refresh over and over and over again to see who's new and who's coming in. Anthony, thanks for being on with me. And, of course, we'll have you back as Coach Calipari continues to build onto this roster. The best basketball mind out there in the media is this dude. He's the dude.
I'll take it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
We'll be right back with the Whole Hog Sports Podcast.
Get the latest breaking news on all Arkansas Razorback sports at WholeHogSports.com. Our award-winning reporters and photographers go beyond game recaps to bring our subscribers the most trusted Razorbacks news anywhere. With expert analysis, the latest in recruiting, plus unique and compelling stories of your favorite teams. Subscribe today at WholeHogSports.com.
And we're back for the third quarter of the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. Like how I did that? I made it into a basketball thing. Yeah.
Could be football, too.
It could be. It could be. I'm with Ethan Westerman now. Ethan covers University of Arkansas women's basketball, softball, and football, and everything that has a ball in it. And we're maybe hockey with a puck. Maybe we get some of those games in there, too.
I did do a track feature as well for our latest
There you
magazine, so
He does it all.
Doesn't have to have a ball.
He does it all. He does it all. So we're going to talk about a little Arkansas women's basketball. And do they have any players left on the roster, Ethan? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, they do, but kind of barely.
Okay.
If you're looking at from last year's team, we're really down to the slim pickings right now. It has been a mass exodus since the season ended of players to the transfer portal. Obviously, you know how the portal works. You don't have to. There's a few players in it right now that could theoretically return to Arkansas.
Right.
But you've already seen your leading scorer from last year and your leading rebounder announce new destinations. So it's been an eventful offseason.
Yeah. So let's talk about the women's basketball program. Let's go back to the beginning before the season began when Jersey Wolfenbarger, who was a McDonald's All-American from Fort Smith Northside, announced that she was going to go into the transfer portal before they played their first game. I think they'd played an exhibition game, and she announced she was going to go into the portal after, or it might have just been a interschool. I don't remember. Anyway, it was before the season officially started. She announced that she was going to be leaving. Then they played a couple of games. Sasha Goforth had come back from missing all of last season, another standout player from the region, from Fayetteville, who had been battling health issues from pretty much from her senior year at Fayetteville to Oregon State, back to Arkansas. She made a valiant effort to try to come back and play basketball. Unfortunately, the health issues were what they were and forced her to leave. A big, big loss. To me, the biggest loss of the season was her loss, not so much because she put up staggering numbers, but it was her experience in making sure teammates were in the right positions, in the right places, that kind of thing. Big loss. Then Talia Scott, the freshman sensation, comes on and she's averaging 22 points a game, and then she only played 20 games, and then she's not on the court anymore for varying reasons of that shall remain a mystery, I guess. So we had that. Then after the season ended, now more Samara Spencer leaving, Miriam Dowda leaving, Sailor Poffenbarger leaving, so they're gone. And so it just seems like Mike Neighbors has just been getting, punched over and over and over again by what's been going on with the program. But he's also gone out and he's bringing in players who he feels like they're going to be able to play at a high level in the SEC.
Yeah, well, the lone college experience with Division I experience that they brought in was Izzy Higginbottom, who she's another player from the state. She's from Batesville. She was 8th in D1 last year with 22.2 points per game while at Arkansas State. Arkansas knows firsthand how good she is because she lit them up whenever Arkansas played over there earlier this year. So they got a great transfer in, but right now it's just a matter of, the math, just do the math. How many players you're losing with experience opposed to bringing in Izzy, and you brought in also a junior college forward who's not played played on the D1 level yet. So you're just doing the math, and right now it's just like you said, it's punch after punch, and the punches are outweighing any sort of healing that's happening.
He's definitely trying to duck and dodge and move the best he can. So that's going on now with the Arkansas women's basketball program. I'm going to butcher this name, Vera Ojenuwa. Is that it? I got that right?
Pretty much.
Okay, close enough.
Yeah.
Close enough. She is a JUCO transfer from Kansas, is coming in. So a couple new players. Jenna Lawrence. I haven't heard anything about her leaving. She will be back, and I can't remember now who all is left with the roster. But he's got probably 5, 6, 7 players. He's going to be looking at bringing in new players.
I brought this up yesterday on the basketball podcast that we record. I mean, it's almost similar right now. I mean, you're not down to 0 like the men's basketball team was, but whenever John Calipari said, I went and spoke to the team, we have no team, but you knew he had, he didn't have a team, but he had a lot of NIL money and his pedigree of being a great coach, and he had time. On the women's side right now, it's kind of like, you need to put together a team.
Right.
Do you have the NIL? We don't know where the NIL's at. I've heard varying, reports on where that's at. And they got to fill a team that needs to be competitive in the SEC. And right now, you're just looking at how many spots they need to fill, and you're like, can they do it?
Yeah.
It's a tough spot for them right now. Mike Neighbors has been going kind of the JUCO route, bringing in junior college players, and then also the international route. Just he had said before, jokingly, like we might look like the United Nations next year, just with how many different nationalities.
So what you're saying is he's going to go to Paris. And then as the players come off the court, he's going to say, hey.
And not Paris, Arkansas.
No. Yeah. After the Olympics, at the Olympics. Say, come on to Arkansas. We can.
They're going to have to figure something out. It's right now, you look at it on paper, and it's, I mean, of course, this all changes by the time the cycle's over with all this transfer stuff. But, whenever you start stacking up Arkansas with SEC teams right now, what they have right now would not be competitive at all in the SEC. So
the SEC is already the best basketball conference for women in the country. Oh, and by the way, they're adding Texas next year, a program that was an Elite 8 team that did that without its best player, and Oklahoma, a team that is rising back up again, that are coming into the league. So it's going to go from really, really tough to, oh my God, tough.
Yeah, it's just how it stands right now. You just kind of hope that if you're a Razorback fan, you hope that maybe Samara Spencer or Miriam Dowda has second thoughts and decide they want to come back. But even then, even if you get those two back, you still need to do some work in the portal with this.
It's 1,000.
It's going to be a tough league next year, like it always is. So, but it's, going back to the top, what we were talking about with just how things unfolded in the season, it was already with Jersey Wolfenbarger, her departure, that was kind of, at the time, oh my goodness, it's that's a hit on the program, but it's how many hits they've taken since then. It's almost like you forget that ever even happened, because it's just player after player, and these are good players. And there has been some stuff in the aftermath, kind of learning about maybe team chemistry problems between upperclassmen, lowerclassmen. So there's definitely was some stuff there. You don't know. There's always fingers to be pointed, but it seems like right now it might be trying to get back to ground zero and start fresh with just a new team, new dynamic.
Now, as you mentioned, Sailor Poffenbarger, she has since landed at Maryland, which is where she's from. So good for her to get to go back home. And Talia Scott to Auburn. So, good for her. And then Jersey Wolfenbarger, she signed with the LSU, I think, about 15 minutes after the portal opened. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and also we're talking about Arkansas needing to fill up transfers, also have an assistant coach spot now open that they're close to filling that. It's probably, I think within the next few days, we'll probably hear something about that. But Pauline Love, who's a great recruiter who got her all, she really helped the program get these great players in there. She's now at Alabama in the same role.
Well, Ethan, thanks for being on with us. Of course, we'll have you back again as we continue to fill roster spots for the women's basketball team. We'll have you come on. If you want to find out more about what's going on with the women's basketball program, WholeHogSports.com, and Ethan will have you covered.
Yep, and softball season's in swing right now. No pun intended. Giving them a lot of coverage right now. They deserve it. They're really rising in the polls. So if you need anything with these women's sports teams, I try and do my best.
We'll be right back, and we will have our question of the day when we come back with the Whole Hog Sports Podcast.
If you're enjoying this podcast, consider a newspaper subscription to the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette or the River Valley Democrat Gazette. We have a special offer for our podcast listeners, so visit nwaonline.com/NWA podcast to get started. You can also click the subscribe button on our websites, nwaonline.com and rivervalleydemocratgazette.com, or call us at 479-684-5509 and be sure to say that you're a podcast listener. Now back to the show.
And we are back with our final segment of this Whole Hog Sports Podcast. I'm Chip Souza, the host of the podcast. And this is a fun little segment that we're going to have at the end of every podcast where we're going to solicit information, questions, and things like that from our WholeHogSports.com message board. And we're going to have a question of the day that we'll post on our message board, and we'll answer. We will use some of those answers to those questions on our podcast, and we think it'll be a fun little interaction thing with us. So be sure and follow our message board at WholeHogSports.com and jump on if it's a question that you have an opinion on. We may get you on our podcast, and we think this will be a nice little segment. So our question of the day for this podcast is: the Razorbacks lost quarterback KJ Jefferson to the transfer portal when the season ended, but they signed quarterback Taylon Green out of the transfer portal. The question is this a win, a lose, or a draw for the Hogs? Now, Hog Doctor says, I think this will be a win because TG, talking about Taylon Green, fits CBP's, which is Coach Bobby Petrino's, and that's a little abbreviated version because he does have other letters added to his name sometimes, but CBP's offense better than KJ with his passing skills. KJ was in Dan Enos' offense, was a mess. I think we would kind of agree to that. And his offensive line was lacking, but that wasn't his fault. I also think TG has brought a sense of team leadership that may have been lacking from last year from KJ. Something was amiss with KJ in the locker room last year, and I sense that this year's quarterback will be an improvement in that department. Call me an optimist, but I'm pleased with the change. Jimbo77 says it's a win for the Hogs from a leadership standpoint. It's been reported that TG has command of the offense and much more vocal with the teammates. KJ has shown that he can do the right in the right system and as with the right play caller, but has seen what he can't do in the wrong system as a play caller, and he's never really been that vocal. If TG stays healthy and learns BP's, which is Bobby Petrino's offense, he can really shine. A lot of it depends on the other skill guys learning the offense and making the right reads. And Go Navy says KJ seemed to hit his upside and was needing a change of scenery. I think he had just become stagnant here. I wonder how hard he was working in training, conditioning, et cetera, in the offseason. So anyway, it's a lot of different opinions there, but most everyone says that the transfer portal, the change from KJ Jefferson to Taylon Green is a win for the Hogs, and we'll see how that plays out. I know just based on what I saw in the red-white game, he has a lot of upside, a lot of mobility, only the season as it plays out, we'll be able to see whether it was a win, a lose, or a draw. But according to the consensus on the Whole Hog Sports message board, this was a win for the Hogs. Also want to give a shout-out to the newest edition of Hogs Illustrated magazine is now on newsstands everywhere, and you'll want to see that. Got a lot of good information in there on the hiring of Coach John Calipari. You will not want to miss that issue, and it is out there on newsstands. Go check that out. We'll catch you next time on the Whole Hog Sports Podcast.